Are you tired of learning licks but not knowing how to actually use them in a jam? Here's how to take a simple idea and stretch it into a massive section of a blues solo. Let's dig in. Maybe this sounds like you. I used to learn a lick and then I'd only use it in that specific tune, and it was kind of like it was frozen somehow and it could not be changed. But we get so much more from what we learn when we apply it to different situations. Sometimes that means changing the rhythm up to fit an entirely different tune, but sometimes that means changing the rhythm within the same tune to keep things from sounding boring and repetitive. Let me show you what I mean. You've probably heard me play some form of this lick if you've been following these Tuesday Blues lessons for a while, but real quick, if you want to understand why certain notes work over different chords like I'm going to show here, grab my free fretboard toolkit at the link in the description. But watch what happens when I play the same note sequence relative to the B chord while changing just the rhythm of the lick. Think back to our E lick. We can move this into B when we think about this less as an E blues lick and more as a lick played out of an E chord shape. So if we convert this shape into a movable shape and move up to where our root is on the 6th string 7th fret, that's a B. Now we can take that same fretboard pattern and play it over B. And with that intact, we really just made one modification to get there. And the modification is when we slide up over E, we played that open 1st string at the top of this little roll. Well, we can't do that once we get here because that's an E note, not a high B. So what we'll do is just reach up to play that note. We could have fretted that over E at the 5th fret 2nd string, but we opt for that open string when we can't get it ringing and singing for us. But here over B, because it doesn't work, we'll just fret that B at the 12th fret. But with that structure intact, and we found it on the fretboard, then we can tweak it. And let's change the feel a little bit, because with our E lick, we had that sort of slow, quick move on the 3rd string up to the 2nd. We've got a 16th note followed by two, or an 8th note followed by two 16th notes rather. But we can change that into more of a shuffle feel like this. Let those notes kind of hang a little longer. There's not that quickness on that 2nd string. And then also our slide down was really slurry over E. Here we might want to separate out the notes a little more and get it into a triplet rhythm. It will sound like that. Triplet as we wrap up. So changing from this to this. It's a subtle difference, but you can add just a little bit of character to your licks as you change them through a part. Now, what if we take this down from B to A and into E, like you'll find in the last 4 bars of a 12-bar blues? A great place to showcase this is in bars 9, 10, and 11 of a 12-bar blues. That's because we get all 3 chords right there in a row, starting with our B. And we already know an option that we can use here over B. And we started at E. That's where we're going. How about something different for A? Try this. We can start with our bass, and we need to know that our bass could still be played out of this position, the 5th fret on the 6th string with this shape, but we got an open string, so we might as well use it just like we did here in our E roll. All right, so we're going to play that open string, free up some fingers if nothing else, and think about this as our starting point and sliding up to this position. That's the E on the 3rd string at the 9th fret, and then the G, the 8th fret, 2nd string, and then there's our A, 2 frets higher. All right, so So what we can do over A is play with more of a triplet feel throughout, with a lot more picking and a lot less sliding around. That'll give some nice contrast. One more time. Hear how that's just straight picked. It still has that triplet rhythm, so it still feels bluesy and in that shuffle world, but we're not doing all that slippery, slidey stuff. It's just picking it straight. And to me, playing that adds a nice contrast between these two that we just covered. See how it's the same melodic shape contorted into 3 different phrases just by changing the rhythm of what we're playing. That's the power of rhythmic variation. It keeps things sounding fresh, but there's another easy way to accomplish this same thing. Let's try a different approach with a new lick. This lick has elements of Chuck Berry, Clapton, SRV. It's based on one of the classic blues moves that nearly everybody uses. And you may know that you can move this lick, this exact phrase, down the neck for different chords, and that works. 7th position for B, 5th for A, and open for E. The fretboard toolkit that I mentioned earlier shows you exactly why these positions work the way they do. But here's what's cool. Instead of just moving the same pattern around, what if we keep the framework of the lick the same, but change up the note order for each chord? Now it sounds like 3 completely different licks, even though you can tell they're related. They share the same DNA, the same main idea throughout, but each chord kind of has its own little thing going on. Let me break this down for you. Let's take this as our starting point. That classic blues and rock and roll sound here that's coming from the minor pentatonic scale on the top 4 strings. And we're just adding that classic blues minor third to major third move. Kind of hits that in-between note on the 3rd string, right? And that note has showed up in the chord shapes that I've been playing this entire lesson. So now that we have our boundary points, that scale plus a note, let's take that, shift down to A, and still reach within that same boundary zone, but in this case, let's change the order up by going high first and maybe working our way down the strings, right? So here I reached up to the 8th fret on the 1st string, down through the top 3 strings. So we clearly have something that's rooted in the same musical area, right? Right, that and this. They sound like they belong together, but we've changed the order of the notes, even though it's really, to me, rooted in this same idea. And we see it again when we get down to E, and this time maybe we work from the middle out and then back down into our minor third to major third ending point. Now, think about how you might combine both of these concepts, rhythmic variation and changing the note order across a full progression. That's where things really get interesting. Now, earlier I showed you how to transform one lick into multiple musical ideas just by changing the rhythm or the melody. But the thing is, even with these tweaks, a lot of us still get stuck playing the same old positions on the fretboard. Watch Tuesday Blues 427 next to learn what's probably been keeping you trapped in familiar territory and how to break out of it. I'll see you there. Until then, practice smart and play on.